my husband last week when he finally asked if maybe I should tell him before I started here. And so, yeah.
Wrong work too.
Dustin, please don't video. Sorry. I'm good at that. This is kind of like, when I told Rick, this is like 45 years of throw up. Because I think just to start from the beginning and just move forward really quick. My real dad was killed when I was about a year old on a motorcycle accident, so I never really knew him. I did not meet, I sought out and found my biological family when I was 42. I'm 50 now, so 8 years ago. I spent that whole time wondering why they never wanted me, why they knew where we lived, but I never knew who they were for 42 years until I found them. I had 2 aunts and an uncle, and my grandma was still alive, and I got to meet them. So, that was just a part of my life, wondering why that family didn't want me. And my mom remarried when I was probably about 4 or 5, and I don't really remember anything about that dad except for when they were divorced. And he would take me when he still had visitation, and he would take me home. The police would have to come and find us, and they would bring me home. And finally, because he kept terrorizing our family with different stuff at the house, he was arrested and put away, and so that's all I ever knew. So, by this point, I didn't have a dad. I wanted a dad like everybody else in school had. And I lived a lot with my grandparents. My grandma was the church secretary, my grandpa was a deacon, so I grew up in the church, but I just remember running up and down the hallways and helping my grandpa fix stuff. And, I knew who God was in my head, but that's the only place he was in my head. And so then, I remember it was on a Halloween. My mom was going on a blind date with this guy, and he came in and sat down, and I'm sure she was horrified because first thing I did was call up in his lap and say, "Hey, are you going to be my new dad?" and he was like just kind of looking at me, and that's it. But anyway, he did eventually become the only dad I would ever really know. He and my mom married, he adopted me. I was glad. I was like all the other kids now had a mom and a dad. But not too long after that, and at some point in between dad number 2 and dad number 3, I was sexually assaulted at a mall when I was about 7 years old. And to this day, my mom still never knows. That was just something I could never tell her. And after my mom and dad were married, for probably about 2 years, I was sexually assaulted by a neighborhood boy that lived in the neighborhood. I thought he was a neighborhood boy. We moved, and I thought, okay, this is great. I don't have to endure this anymore. And so we moved, and everything was cool for a couple of years. And then my dad began changing. There was verbal abuse. There was physical abuse. His love was not unconditional. His love was based on performance. If you made a 98 on a test, that wasn't good enough. I had a stepsister, and no matter what we did, nothing was ever good enough for us. I showed horses growing up, and at one point I was a National Reserve Grand Champion, and that wasn't good enough. When I got home, I got beat because I wasn't national champion. So everything was based on that. Also, too, during all this time, we move away from the neighborhood boy. I think everything's good. But then I endured more sexual abuse. This time it was from somebody that was very well known. He was a lawyer. He was a district attorney, and he was my dad. And so for years I dealt with that. I wanted my mom to be happy more than anything in the world, so I never told her. And that went on all through junior high and part of high school. I dealt with that because in 7th grade I started drinking heavily and using drugs. That was the other way to make everything go away. When I got into high school, I actually had to sit in the parking lot and drink before I could go into school. That was just the only way to function. My kids know some of the funny part. I guess it's funny. In high school, in biology class, when everybody else was growing tomato plants in the greenhouse on the roof of the high school, I was growing pot. And I passed biology, so that was, okay. I learned how to make moonshine at a friend's house, so, lots of stuff like this. But, all these activities were things that just masked all the pain, all the shame, all the guilt that I felt. I began selling drugs, pretty much just speed and pot was what I sold. I learned how to cut the speed with baking soda so I could keep all the good stuff for myself and sell to underclassmen, and they didn't know the difference. I had several knee surgeries. My dad made a comment one day about, hey, you could sell those pain pills for $10 a pop. So I was like, okay, cool. So I did. And so I would sell all my pain pills and use that money to buy myself better drugs. And when I was 16, between 15 and 16, the sexual abuse stopped. And so I thought, okay, this is good. On my 16th birthday, my older sister and I both were put on birth control pills and taught how to have sex for the things that we wanted. When I got into college, that's what paid my apartment rent. That's what bought my textbooks. If there was things I needed, I had to find my own ways to do that. And if I didn't, there wasn't going to be any money coming in to help me. So that's what my sister and I learned how to do. The alcohol and the drugs continued because that made everything stop. That made everything be numb. Finally, as a junior in college, I decided that I don't want that lifestyle anymore. I couldn't keep doing that, so I got married, knowing that the man that I married I didn't love, but it was going to rescue me from that lifestyle. I wouldn't want to do that anymore. And it was okay. I didn't have to do, I pretty much lost the desire for drugs and alcohol because I don't think I ever really had a desire for those. They just made everything go away. That marriage lasted probably about 2 years. I had a miscarriage during that, and I was thinking a child would help that. That's not God's plan. And probably within about 3 years later, I was married again. All I knew how to, my identity was found in who I could find to marry me and love me, because that's all I've wanted my whole life. And part of the song saying, looking back, and I look back, and the whole time God was always there with me. There were so many times that I know I cried out to Him, if you were real, I wouldn't have to be doing these things. You would be here. And I never thought I'd heard Him answer. And got married again. There was still, God was not, we didn't even go to church on Christmas and Easter. There was no church. I knew who God was in my head. I prayed to Him. I don't know that He ever answered until one day, and I was pregnant, and I was told that the baby that I was carrying was going to be born. If he was born and lived, he would be blind, deaf, and mentally retarded. And when I told my parents, the first thing my dad said was I was having an abortion because you don't need to take care of something like that. You've got better things to do with your time. And it had gotten to the point in my life to where anything my dad said, I went directly against it because there's so much anger against him. And so, of course, I did have an abortion. That baby sits at the table right now. And he's 26 years old. He's pretty okay, normal.
He has no stomach muscles.
Yeah, he has no stomach muscles, so he can't go sit. That's okay. We'll keep him. But just the whole thing again. My identity was in what man would love me, and anyway, kind of you reap what you sow. After 13 years of marriage, the boy's dad walked out. That was it. He left. He quit his job. He walked out of the house. He didn't take anything. So now I was a single mom with a 6-year-old, a 2-year-old, a house that was 2 years old. So I was looking at a really big mortgage and a brand new pickup, and I had nothing. And at that point, I can remember laying on my living room floor, and that was the first time I ever called out to God. I was like, if you are really there, I have to know. I have to know. Because I can't do this on my own. And that's the first time that, I'm sure it's not the first time He spoke to me, it's the first time when He spoke that I listened. And on that day I accepted Christ, and it was there's no way to describe the feeling of just complete, almost like weightlessness, just peace as he came in. And I knew that it wasn't going to be easy. I had a lot to do. But as he came in, and over the weeks through the divorce and everything else, just, my house was taken care of, my boys were taken care of. There was so much that the only explanation is it was God. You know, He provided everything. I joined a singles group at church. I went to church, and it was one of those things that friends came and pretty much drove me kicking and screaming, because the last place I wanted to be was church with all those Christian people that didn't have to go through the stuff that I had to go through. And because the only, other than my grandparents, the only Christian people I had been around were those that were better than everybody else, and they judged you and they looked down on you, and because of everything that had happened to me, I just knew it was like painted all on the outside, and they could all see that. But I went, and that's not how it was. The message that day, it's just, I felt like I'm sitting in a room with 1,000 people, but it felt like that message was just for me. And when I joined the singles group, they helped take care of my kids. They allowed me the freedom to do some stuff. They allowed me the freedom to heal. And our plans are never God's plans, and He has a really good sense of humor. And because I can remember on May 17th, because that was Tommy's birthday, and he was 2, and I was out at the Washita Mountains in Oklahoma with Kelly, and had a great time, and I told my mom, I was like, I'm never getting married, I do not need a man in my life, I can do this on my own, I can raise my kids, and I can do this. And my mom was like, okay, that's good, that's fine, whatever. And 2 weeks later at a singles function, this man walked in the room, and as he walked through the door, and I was at the other part of the room, I was like, and it may have been Carla standing by me, I don't remember. And, whoever was standing there was like, what? And I was like, I'm going to marry that man. I do not want to get married. And they're like, what are you talking about? And I was like, I just know, this man walked through the door, and God said, is this the man you're married? I'm like, no, I'm getting married. 3 months later, I was married. And it was one of those things where how, I don't know, because I was rude. That's my husband over there now, 14 years now, but it's like he would talk to me, I was rude. We went to Six Flags with a big group, and I refused to ride any ride with him at all. If he was in line behind me, I would leave to go to the bathroom and come back and get in line with somebody else, so that I just didn't even have to talk to him. I tried so hard to be rude, and he pursued me. And the only way I can compare that to today is God has pursued me my whole life too, and all those times that I turned my back on Him, I rejected the things He said, I rejected the things I was supposed to be doing. He just kept reaching out, He kept loving me. And He takes so much crap from us and just loves us. But anyway, I'm thankful for a husband that does put up with me, because sometimes there's a lot to put up with. Sometimes, too, the people we love the most are the ones that we lash out at the most, the ones we hurt the most. When all of this went on, I don't know, 11 years now, 12 years ago now, my dad was murdered. There were really mixed emotions over that, because he was my dad. And even though he had done all the things he had done to me, he was still my dad. I still loved him. To this day, I don't understand that. I want to not love him. But God doesn't allow me to not love Him. And through all of that, we never found out who did it. There was a lot of anger, there was a lot of stuff, and all my anger was directed at Tim, and he just endured it. And there's times when stuff comes back up about it now, and he's patient with me, he endures it. Then he's patient when, I don't know, most of y'all know me a lot. If you don't, this is my family. My family raised their hands. But I have a big family that God has given me. I have Dusty and Tommy, who I actually gave birth to them. And then the other 3 boys at the table, God brought to me. I don't understand why He trusted me enough, but He brought them to me. Part of my identity in all of this too, I've listened to Rick and Reggie talk about his identity was in football, and Rick talks about his identity was in coaching. And for the longest time, I was a youth leader for 8 years, and my identity was in being a youth leader. I finally decided that, I didn't think I liked kids, but I do most of the time. And just because I see, to me, there's even more hurt in the world now than there was when I was growing up, and I want to protect them. I want to save them all from that, and I know I can't, but so I just have a huge heart for the youth. So for 8 years, I was a youth leader, and that was my identity. I was able to take youth all over the world with me on mission trips to Russia, to Mexico, Alaska, New Orleans, and just see them serve God, see them be removed from some of the destructive environments that they live in. Then in February of this year, we walked away from the church. There were some hurts that were directed against my family that were more than I wanted to deal with inside the church, and I decided that I am the church, my family's the church, we're part of rock bottom, and that's the church, and I don't need a building that I go to on Sunday mornings. But when that happened, I also lost my identity. I was no longer a youth leader. I no longer had these kids all the time. So I started a new identity, and it was at Gainesville State School, which is a maximum security prison for males aged 10 to 19. And my identity there became a mentor and a mom. And in the 18 months I was there were probably about 50 guys, 50 boys that I mentored, maybe more. You know, I could go to the dorms and just sit and talk to all of them. I just wanted someone to remember that they were there and to care. And then I lost that identity. August of last year, Tim and I had to turn in all of our volunteer registrations, and I lost that identity because that's God allowed me to bring Mike home. And I fought for 10 months for Mike. There's a law that says you can't go live with your mentors, and I'm not one to take no for an answer very well. So every time they would say no, I was like, okay, who's your boss? And you know, I just moved up the chain until we actually were at the parole board in Austin, and I had to do a long petition, and Mike was initially released to foster care for 3 months. It was in our papers that we go to see him, so we made an hour and a half drive every weekend. And then they finally called one day and said, we grant your petition, you can bring him home. And so God allowed me to bring him home. But in doing that, I lost another identity. And I guess all this time I think I've spent trying to find an identity and who I am here on earth. And what I finally had to realize is that my identity is I'm a child of God's. And it doesn't matter who I am here on earth. He can give me the ability to be a mom, to be a mentor, to be a friend. But my true identity is I'm his child. There's just, you know, I guess I just look at how, just like you said, how far he's brought me. I look down the mountaintop and I look and I've come a long way. I'm still a work in progress. I still have a long way to go. There are the scars on the battleground. And one of the things they taught us at the retreat was that if you look in somebody's eyes, you can see the scars on their heart. And I see all these kids that live in my home, and I see that, but I've never stopped and looked in the mirror at my own eyes. And, you know, I make my kids talk about their past, and then I guess I'm pretty hypocritical because I've never talked about mine. And doing this is the hardest thing, but it's also, this has been the most healing thing that's ever happened. I didn't pass out, so it was very good. Because I was really nervous, but God has, I mean, Rick can tell you, when I finally wrote out what I wanted to say, and I gave it to him, and then it's like, I don't need it anymore, because God is just kind of telling me what I need to say. The other thing, too, is we blame Mike for a lot of things. And Mike's got the biggest, most loving heart, and 4 months ago he came and said, Mom, somebody needs a place to live, and we're like, okay, bring them. And we brought Ian home, and there's Ian next to Mike, I think. And, you know, Ian and I have talked, and it was kind of cool. Ian's come from a really bad past, too, and I can sympathize with a lot of that. I don't know what it's like. But his one comment before is, you know, he had a brother he hadn't seen in 8 years. And he didn't think he'd ever get to see him again. And then 6 weeks after he lived with us, we brought his brother here from Puerto Rico.
Amen.
That's really So, you know, I think I stand in amazement most of the time on the things that God has done, because these boys are in my home, but I'm the most blessed person on earth. Because of everything that God's given me, you know, I wonder why He would trust me with them, but but I'm thankful he does, you know, and I know it's a battleground that we still stand on every day, but I think through having my rock bottom guys to support me, if Rick's doing this, I'm like, okay, I'm good. I'm not done anyway. You know, just having my rock bottom guys to support me and know now that, yeah, I've gone through a lot of the same struggles they have. Maybe the addictions have been different. The addictions have been more needing to be loved, but I think everybody has that. Everybody just wants to be loved. Everybody wants a dad, and it's really hard to. I wish I could express to parents how much being a parent really means to the kids. I mean, to me, I know, but you know, the dad that I wanted was never the dad that I needed, but I have God. He's my Heavenly Father, and with Him, that's all I need. And I think I'm done.
I had to give Brenda the little 2-minute sign.